Hello and welcome to the Cite View on Sake Online. My name is Leslie Moyo. In today's program, we look at Zimbabwe's ever-shifting political landscape. We're looking at the state of opposition politics in Zimbabwe and the dynamic within the ruling. We also want to discuss the role of civil society in terms of building public trust when it comes to public institutions. And I'm joined in today's program by a political analyst. He has also worked extensively within society in Zimbabwe. That is Mr. Takura Zhangazha. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
All right, maybe let's start. How would you then describe as the current political landscape in Zimbabwe? Maybe let's take it from the last elections that we did and then in the last years. How would you describe Zimbabwe's political landscape?
Well, the political landscape in Zimbabwe is largely dominated since 2023 by the ruling Zanu PF party, and also a fractured opposition, because the opposition has had multiple splits after 2023 and does not have an open strategy around what it intends to do. But largely, Zimbabwe is quite effectively a one-party state at the moment, both legally in terms of parliamentary representation and Zanu PF's unassailable majority, but also in relation to the fact that there is no evident opposition narrative that is there.
And then what does that mean for democracy, participatory democracy in Zimbabwe, where we have such a political setup that you have described?
What it means is that we have a technically participatory democracy. We have elections in Zimbabwe. We even have by-elections since 2023. And the majority of those have been won by Zanu PF. Whether an MP has passed on, or a councillor has passed on, or somebody has resigned or been fired from their party. So technically, we do have a participatory democracy. But in terms of our political culture, we do not have participatory democracy. We have a highly polarized political culture, but one that also does not give more of values to politics. It's more about power for its own sake, and a lot of, if you want to call it, a lot of accumulation elements to politics, corruption, materialism to politics. So you don't really sense a democratic culture in terms of democratic values and participatory democracy, as you put it.
Maybe let's focus now on the opposition itself. You have described the state of opposition, but maybe let's go deeper into that by looking at the developments that have happened in the opposition. The presidential candidate Nelson Chamisa seemed to have exited the stage. There's been the characters like Chabang who have also come in. We've seen mass recalls that are happening in the opposition. But maybe now, as we build up to the next elections, maybe before we even get to the Zanu PF politics, let's look at the state of opposition itself. Does it then bring confidence to ordinary Zimbabweans, especially those that participated in the last elections, who voted or participated in any other form? Yeah.
Well, the opposition is hoist by its own petard. It has made its own mistakes, and the results are there to be seen. We see what has happened now. The opposition is weaker. Public confidence in opposition politics is lower, but we function on the basis of an electoral cycle. So every time we go towards elections, there's new public and excitement and anticipation around elections. So it's whatever is happening with the opposition now appears to be ephemeral. The only problem is that the opposition has not been organic. It's been event-based opposition politics, election-based opposition politics. And that means it's not good for democracy and it's not good for the country, because anybody now can become an opposition member of parliament, an opposition member of a local government council, as long as they have the money or the populist narratives that are necessary to be in such positions at the moment. So you have no big betrayal of the public by the opposition. The public just basically anticipates the opposition to be against Zanu PF at an election every five or 6 years. And there's no big value system attached to our electoral politics. There's no ideological grounding to the opposition. Zanu is actually better at ideological grounding because it talks about nationalism and it talks about the liberation struggle. With the opposition, no, there's no clear ideological grounding, except maybe religious leanings, Christian doctrine, but this is also not so consistent. It depends on who's talking about it. But essentially, the opposition has failed in its mission to be organic.
All right. So I was saying, you did speak about how fragmented the opposition is, but what would be the structural changes that will see a more united opposition movement coming up? One that is more organic, that is not event-based, like you put it.
Yeah, the answer to that is relatively easy. The opposition is not going to lead any revolution in Zimbabwe. There is no revolution going to happen via the opposition. It has to accept electoral politics are essentially incremental. They're not revolutionary. So whatever gains they make via the electoral process, they have to ensure that they make the most of those gains. So if you win Bulawayo city council elections, for example, if you win Harare, if you win Mutare, all the major urban centers in Zimbabwe, you have to prove you're able to lead as a political opposition, even though you are running urban councils. And you also have to prove that you know what you're doing as a political party or a political organization. So in general, the opposition needs a revamp. It needs an ideological revamp. It also needs an electoral uh, incremental change revamp around understanding the fact that you cannot assume losing the presidential elections is the be all and end all of opposition politics. No, you've won, so the opposition has won so many urban councils. It has also at one point had a majority in parliament, a simple majority in parliament. And it has not made the most of those incremental gains. The opposition needs to learn that it is not a revolutionary movement at the moment. No, it doesn't have that capacity. And I don't foresee it having that capacity in 2028 either.
Right. And now, between now and 2028, do you see as more organized political movement coming up if we are to have elections as the Constitution says that we are due for elections in 2028? Do you see any political movement coming up now, even to challenge the ruling party in 2028 if we are to have elections?
Yeah. There will be some sort of galvanizing of opposition politics as we get closer to the election. And it's completely natural. When you have a general and harmonized election, obviously there will be new energies around that electoral process. And yeah, you will have an opposition that is stronger, but only temporarily for the elections. And that's the sad part, that we are functioning on the basis of an electoral cycle that we really overpopularize or make populist, and it doesn't give any new credence or value to democratic participation as you use the term. So we will have a strong opposition towards an election, but only for populist purposes. And it's a very sad development because it also then leads to if you want to call it a more like Bamba Zonke sort of political competition between opposition candidates who are not really there for the values, but more for the money, or for being parliamentarians or councillors in order to get access to state resources. And that creates an erosion of public trust around why opposition politics should matter. Because once somebody becomes an MP, gets a car, or somebody becomes a councillor and is implicated in getting urban land in inappropriate ways, it becomes a competition for jobs and money. And that means the opposition is essentially just a carry-on sort of like baggage for acquisition of personal wealth, and not necessarily for the betterment of the people, of the lives of Zimbabwe.
Let's shift to the ruling party. We've seen the ruling party has dominated, the news. A lot of so-called internal fights that are happening. Is it something to read on? Let's say, how serious are these so-called divisions that we're reading about in the newspapers?
No, the divisions within the ruling party are there, and they're around succession. There's no doubt about that. And within Zanu PF, I mean, from our experiences in 2017 as ordinary Zimbabweans, when Zanu PF was clearly divided around Mugabe's succession, there's no smoke without some sort of fire within Zanu PF. So they are very, very divided, and they are hiding it. They do have a sense of collective responsibility. They know their limits about how they can handle their divisions, publicly at least. But indeed, they are divided, but they have no opposition. So they're not worried. In fact, they get more divided when they realize how weak the opposition is.
And obviously, this week they're heading to a conference. Would the outcomes there or resolutions that are going to make at the conference likely to shape maybe the political future going forward? Do you see any significant changes that will come, especially from the conference, considering that it's not a congress, but it's more of a conference?
No, there are no significant changes that will come from the Zanu PF conference scheduled for this week. Like you said, it's not a congress. The only dynamics that will play out is maybe some populist expressions of who people prefer. But essentially, the resolutions of that conference will not go outside of the resolutions of the previous Congress. And I don't think they will change the resolutions even of the previous conference to an extent that it becomes significant. But it basically means ZANU PF's succession politics will also play out until 2027 when they have their Congress. So it's a long haul, sort of like ZANU PF factionalism. It won't end this week. It's going to continue until the next Congress in 2027.
And the talk around 2030, what's your take or your view on that? Either extending the current term or bringing in a new presidential candidate who then leads ZANU PF going forward?
The 2030 debate is unconstitutional for now. We are due constitutionally for elections in 2028. And unless something dramatic happens around changing the constitution or a judicial interpretation of a new act of parliament that wants to amend the constitution, there is nothing else that is going to really change about elections being due in 2028. So it's a long shot by ZANU PF's pro 2030 faction. Technically, it's quite literally almost impossible. But we know that if you do the legalistic processes, try and get some court judgments around the matter, they might pull it through. But I don't see it happening at all. I don't see Mnangagwa being able to extend his term from 2028 to 2030. And I would see it as a highly publicly unpopular move anyway, whether within ZANU, within the opposition, or with the general public. It would be almost like a mini political suicide by any future leader of ZANU PF to accept a 2030 agenda in Zimbabwe now. No, I don't see that happening. I don't see young Zimbabweans accepting it. I don't see middle-aged Zimbabweans accepting it, and I don't see the war veterans accepting it. I don't see that.
Mm-hmm. Then maybe speaking of young Zimbabweans, I see a lot of them are active on social media, but what does it take to transfer that energy, that participation when it comes to real politics in Zimbabwe, taking it away from social media and actually you see it happening on the ground, but we don't see it much in Zimbabwe. Yes, we've seen it in other countries where we see recently we've seen young people maybe taking into the streets, being politically active, but in Zimbabwe it seems not to be so. How would you describe our Zimbabwean politics when it comes to youth participation?
Well, I think the first thing is to say that your age is not an ideology. Your age is transient. You can be 20 this year, next year you'll be 21. I mean, you grow up. So your youthfulness is not enough to say you have energy and therefore you can change things. No, it's not enough. It's a good asset for other political agendas if people can harness young anger, young energy to a specific cause. But you must have a cause. You must have an agenda, an ideological pretext of your political activism. And in Zimbabwe's case, unfortunately, our young people do not have an ideological pretext to their activism. It's more about their immediate needs, jobs, money, wealth, and also religion. And that's why you see people like Wikno Chivayo having so much influence, or even some of these pastors that are there now, and pastors that are quite active within youth circles. They tend to sort of like exploit the energy of young people for their own benefit, and then also brainwash young people to follow awkward religious tendencies. And this is not just within the Christian faith, but also within the apostolic faith, sector faith, where a lot of young people are now very superstitious and highly religious, including some regrettable incidents where young people accuse their parents of bewitching them and making them poor in life and being the cause of all their misfortunes and going to wizards and prophets. And so being young is not an ideology. Young people have to understand more the politics of the country, the constitution, the ideological basis of why what's happening is happening. Like if you want to talk about unemployment, for example, you have to understand that unemployment is caused largely by the ideological framework of the economy. Our economy in Zimbabwe is very neoliberal. It's creating bingers and protecting the rich. And when the rich are protected, they get richer, and you get poorer if you're not in a position of influence. And that's why you have all these arguments around tagwires and bingas, as they are referred to now. It's an obscene acquisition of wealth via the state by a few Zimbabweans. And unless young people begin to ideologically query that, as opposed to receiving aqua cars and $50,000 and things like that, then we'll be stuck in the same space with them. Their energy will be popularized and made populist and essentially eventually dissipate, because if you are young, you will eventually get old like the rest of us.
But one I think the civil society used to play a role in terms of political consciousness, but we've seen less of that. Obviously, the shrinking space in Zimbabwe when it comes to the work of civil society. Obviously, the other impact was the shrinking support in terms of financial support, especially coming from the United States government. And how big of an impact is that, especially on issues that we've just addressed, getting our young people to be more politically conscious?
No, civil society was not founded by donors. That's something we have to get out of the way. Civil society has always been in existence, pre-independence and post-independence. It became broader because of post Cold War international relations dynamics, where the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom even expanded their universalism around human rights and good governance and democracy. And civil society does not then exist because there is money. Civil society exists because of values, and it should exist because of values. I mean, gender equality is just a basic value. You can't argue with that. Even if there's no money, you have to pursue it. Or let's say youth empowerment. You have to look at young people and their future. I mean, it's not about whether there's money available for it or not. It's a given. So I think the question about the shrinking civic society space is also about our own capacity to understand Zimbabwean politics and society, and how we have failed to read between the lines and think beyond the donor about what civil society can and should look like. It's not uniform. It is not universal in its approach, and to flinch at the fact of the changing donor dynamics with Ukraine, Palestine, and also Trump is also to fail to think outside the box. We need to think outside the box now. We need to look at how civil society can reorganize. And I remember a meeting I had, or I was part of. No, I didn't have a meeting. I'm not that powerful. But I was part of a meeting with some colleagues from the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. And one of the way forwards that we proposed, though it's probably not actionable in the immediate, was a national working people's convention to re-galvanize, recalibrate how civil society should deal with its current challenges within Zimbabwe and also globally as it relates to donor dynamics. And I think that's still in the works. And I think colleagues and comrades that are still interested in civil society, human rights, good governance, and organic activism should actually work on that National Working People's Convention. Again, it will be a second one. We also have had the Zimbabwe People's Charter, which outlines civil society's demands. But this was many years ago, before the 2008 elections. And perhaps that also needs to be dusted off and brought back into the mainstream narratives.
All right. So as we end our discussion, maybe my last question, it's more of maybe I would say fatigue, because for lack of a better word, in terms of participating in politics, I think for citizens generally, would you say that there's that fatigue where people say things are not changing, therefore either I'm not going to vote this time around, or I'm not going to participate in that meeting or in that political party? Would you say that there's that fatigue or lack of interest in what is happening in our country?
No, I don't think there's fatigue. There's just lack of, I don't know, a lack of new ideas, a lack of a different approach, ideological or even in populist terms. I mean, one of the most astounding things I've noticed is our turn to religion. Politics and religion are separate, but if you mix your religion and your politics, basically you're being very shallow, because Jesus is for everyone. Jesus is with Zanu PF, Jesus is with Triple C, MDC, PF Zapu, Mtwakazi, take your pick. I mean, Jesus is for everyone. But if you make religion your center pivot of politics, it means it's completely uninteresting. And it's all about prophets and charisma and so on, and verses and Bible verses. That's not the way politics should work. There's no fatigue is probably by default, if you want to talk about it that way. It's because there's no interesting difference between either ZANU or the MDC or the Triple C or any other party, and perhaps you need to have a new approach to opposition politics and general politics in Zimbabwe, which is more value-based, ideologically grounded, and not as populist as we have it now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhangazha, for taking your time to share with us your political insights in terms of what's happening in the Zimbabwean political space at the moment. I'm sure we'll have more such discussions as things continue to develop in our country.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.